What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Friday Undefeated Post-Weigh-In Show, brought to you by Pub Sports Radio. I'm your boy Clint, and I'm continuing to rock my purple in support of my Minnesota Vikings during the draft that is going on right now. We are talking UFC Vegas 53. What this show is all about is making sure we get one last look at these fighters before they step into the cage. We're seeing if they have a tough weight cut. We're seeing if maybe their balance is a little bit off. We're seeing who punks who when they go down to face off, and see if maybe we can put just an extra little bit of cash in our pockets tomorrow gambling on these UFC fights. Let's get straight on into it because there's some good stuff this week. So what we got, first fight of the night, Tatsuro Taira taking on Carlos Candelario. We've got Tatsuro coming in at 125.5. Candelario needed the extra half pound. He came in at 126. Tatsuro is cut up. I mean, he gave an intense flex up there on the scale. Kid is undefeated. He's feeling himself. Good addition here for the UFC. Candelario, last one to weigh in, and honestly, he looked a bit rough. It looked like he cuts down pretty tough. He made weight. He moved okay. So even though he looked a little bit rocky on the scale, I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think he's a wrestler. He's one of these guys that knows how to cut that weight. It wasn't fun, but he got it done. At the face-offs, Candelario is a little bit bigger than Tatsuro, and he's got that back. He's got that huge, thick, muscled American wrestling back, and that's something that I look forward to when we talk about who's going to be, physically more imposing, be able to control the other. That has been really my whole thing here with Tatsuro in this fight, is that I think he's probably the better fighter. I think he's fully capable of going out and finishing Candelario. My concern is that Candelario is the better wrestler, and if he's the physically stronger man and the better wrestler, he can just grind this fight away. If he can nullify Tatsuro on the ground, that's my biggest fear with laying minus 240. So for me, not a lot has changed. I am picking Tatsuro. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if he was able to catch Candelario in some kind of a transition, or maybe take his back and get that rear naked choke, kick the legs out from under him. That's what he does. So I'm not going to be surprised one bit if Tatsuro wins this fight. I am picking him to win. In fact, I might sprinkle the submission prop just for some fun. But from a betting perspective, I can't lay minus 240 on a kid that's coming over making his UFC debut against what could potentially be a bad stylistic matchup for him. So majority pass from me, but siding with the favorite here. Second fight of the night, we've got Gina Mazzani taking on Shanna Young. Gina came in at 126, and I just noted that somehow I missed Shanna Young's documents here. I think she came in at 125. But Gina Mazzani, big smile. She is bricked up. She is in some serious shape. I love the hair. She's got the green streaks going on. Shanna Young looked pretty good on the scales as well. She's another one that comes in excellent shape and excellent condition, and they size up really well. Now, when they go to the face-offs, Gina's actually a slight, decent bit bigger than Shanna Young. Shanna Young dropping down to 125. Gina Mazzani made that switch a couple of years ago. It was a good face-off. It was a really good face-off. We've got Gina Mazzani currently at a minus 180 price tag, plus 160 on Shanna Young. Lines are brought to you by Superbook Sports here on this show. And I again kind of have to side with the favorite here. We've seen less resistance in the UFC to the grappling from Shanna Young. However, we've seen gas tank issues from Gina Mazzani. I know a lot of people out there that are just loading up to pile on Gina Mazzani this week because it's a perfect stylistic matchup for her. I tend to think everyone's selling Shanna Young just a little bit short here. If she can make Gina Mazzani work at all for these takedowns, if she can provide any kind of resistance, if she can work back to her feet and make Gina take her down, we've seen Gina blow her wad, slow down, and be relatively helpless later in the fight. Now, Shanna Young, not known to be a huge finisher, more of a grappler herself, so I expect this thing to go over if Shanna Young is winning. Now, I could see Gina Mazzani just kind of steamrolling through her and getting her out of there early. This is women's MMA, an exhausted TKO, an armbar from guard. These things are always on the table. I talked about how there's a shot at violence here in this spot because it's low level. I'm, again, completely staying away from this one. My gut says that Shanna Young pulls a Sam Hughes in this spot. I feel like she's going to maybe give up that first round and then storm her way back into this fight and take it over and pull the upset, catching a lot of people with their pants down. So I'm kind of leaning on the Shanna Young side of things, especially fading the Gina Mazzani gas tank and the fact that if she's fought anybody worth their salt in the UFC, she has lost to them. So I'm going to say dogger pass situation here for me. No real bet investment going in on the front end. Like I said, I will be watching this live, and if we start to see Gina Mazzani huffing and puffing, if Shanna Young is doing the right things after round one, we probably jump in live on the underdog at a better number. Next up, Mike Breeden taking on Natan Levy. Breeden came in at 155.5, Levy 155 on the dot. Breeden looked good, relaxed on the scale, easy made weight, no issues for him. Natan Levy, very stoic and focused today. I mean, intensity coming from Levy. He really wants that first UFC win, you can tell. But boy, is he jacked. Like, this guy comes in incredible shape. Levy got the height and reach advantage here. This was a very respectful face-off. Another spot where, again, I am picking the favorite from like a straight up, I think they win type of perspective, but from a betting side of things, getting plus 170 on Mike Breeden, I think, is interesting. I think he's going to have a volume advantage. He kind of is a Brandon Royval type, a guy that gets in your face, kind of sows chaos and then throws everything but the kitchen sink at you. He likes to go forward. He flurries on his opponents when he gets in close up against the fence. I think Levy's low volume kicking style, mixing in some grappling, like he could grind away a win in this spot, but he's primarily a striker who falls back on that grappling. If he strikes with Breeden, I could see Breeden winning these minutes. I could see Breeden edging out a volume-based, activity-based decision. I expect this one to be close. I expect it to be competitive. I think it's going over the 2.5, but I also don't want to lay minus 190 on Levy because I think Breeden could kind of pull a shocker here on this one. This is another low-level card. Lots of questions about these fighters. I don't trust these minus 200s, these minus 250s, when there's still a lot of proof left that we need to show that they're worthy of those numbers here in these spots. So another dogger pass spot from a betting perspective. I'm saying I think Levy wins it, but it would not shock me if Mike gets a split. Next up, Johan Lainez taking off Gabe Green here. Lainez came in at 169. Gabe Green 170.5. Johan Lainez smiling the whole time he walked up there. This boy is feeling himself. He looks solid on the scales too. He is big. He's a big boy at 170 pounds. Gabe Green jacked. Holy crap. This dude came off an intense stare up on the scale, a big flex. He did crack a smile at the end. He lost it there right at the very end before he got off the stage. I'm expecting big things here. And then we go to the face-offs and oh boy is Johan big. Like, I'm on Gabe Green already, folks. I got in on Gabe Green at minus 115. 2.3 units. Beat the line move. Gabe Green got all the way up to like minus 150, minus 160 at one point during the week. And then it's been consistent money coming back on Johan the other way. Now we're down to minus 135 Gabe Green. Johan is a plus 115 underdog. And I am a little terrified here. Simply because of the size disadvantage. Like, I think Gabe Green is the more well-rounded fighter. I think he's got the UFC caliber experience. He's shown himself to be relatively durable in this spot. But he is taking on an absolute monster. At a certain point, size matters, and the fact that Gabe Green is relatively hittable, seeing the difference in size between these two men, I'm a little nervous. Team Diamond Hands, Team No Hedge, I'm sticking with it. We got on Gabe Green. We beat the line movement. I'm not jumping ship now. But I am absolutely terrified that Johan is just going to murk him in round one because that's what this guy does. Gabe Green has to survive early. He has to take over in this fight. He has to be the well-rounded martial artist for 15 minutes. I think he can do that. It's just a matter of him getting away from that power early on in the fight. So, little nervous about this one. Johan could absolutely pull off another KO here. But I'm on Gabe Green, and that could be a post-weigh-in read. Like, take that for what you will. I don't think if I didn't have the bet on Gabe Green already, I wouldn't be making it today. I'll just say that much. Next up, we've got Daniel Dasilva taking on Francisco Figuerrero. Daniel Dasilva came in at 125 on the dot. Figueiredo 125.5. No issues whatsoever from Daniel Dasilva on and off very quickly today. Very professional. Francisco Figueiredo, he was a little slow getting on the scale this morning. One of those things where it's just a baby red flag, like nothing that we should overly read into, but when they're gingerly stepping onto the scale, I go, huh. So he was a little slow getting up there today. He had a slight waver on the scale as well, which that lack of balance is something I look for when we look for, bad weight cuts that we can maybe expose. These guys size up really well. Both of them tall, both of them lanky. The height and reach advantage ever so slightly looks like it goes to Dasilva. They did a nice little selfie afterward, which is always fun to see when fighters get into it like that up on the stage. We got Daniel Dasilva as a minus 130 favorite, plus 110 Francisco Figuerrero, and I think that's accurate. Like, I'm siding with Daniel Dasilva in this spot. I'm not a fan whatsoever. I'm not a believer in Francisco Figueiredo. He is a fighter that I think only is here kind of riding the coattails of his brother. Now, he's got those raw physical abilities, the same as his brother does. Maybe he can make something of himself. Maybe he gets better. But from what we've seen so far, I'm not overly impressed. I think Daniel's the much better fighter, and I expect him to kind of win this one. Maybe a decision, but at these, again, this is an extremely low-level fight. This is a regional scene MMA type of fight, and especially if Figueiredo is as bad as we think he is, one of these guys could get finished in some way on this fight. So another one I'm really not looking forward to touching. Favorite or pass here for me. Alexander Romanov taking on Chase Sherman, and in a shocker, an absolute shocker, Romanov came in at 236.5. He weighed 240 last week, folks. Like, they're just running it back one more week for this fight, and somehow Romanov came in even lighter. Like, was he just on the treadmill the entire week? Like, did this guy just keep doing cardio because they missed the fight last week? You'd kind of expect him to come in at like 245 or 250 because, you know, he kind of let his guard down a little bit after making weight the last time around. So I'm impressed. He came in even lighter. It was really funny, though, because when they weighed him in, they actually called him 136 instead of 236. So you can hear John Morgan on the stream laughing his ass off, and he's like, that is a badass bantamweight right there. So good times were had by all at the weigh-ins this morning. Chase Sherman came in at 247. He gave a very unenthusiastic flex on the scale. That's a dead man walking, and he knows exactly what he's getting himself into. I wouldn't be overly excited if I was getting brought in to get my ass beat by Romanov on national television either. When they face off, same as last time. Romanov is slightly thicker. Frame size wise, they're roughly the same. I still think this is Romanov's fight to lose, absolutely. He's a 20-1 favorite for a reason, but we are definitely getting into that slip on a banana peel type of price tag. We saw some big underdogs in low-level fights come through the last couple of weeks. And that's where you get these mistakes. You know, these numbers equate to percentages of victory. Is Alexander Romanov 99% to win this fight? I mean, probably, yeah. But, like, if he stubs his toe on his takedown and Chase ends up clipping him on his way down, like, you know, you just never know at this price tag. I would not suggest doing anything as far as parlaying Alexander Romanov or, like, anything like that. It doesn't do anything for you. It's going to bring your 4 or 5 leg parlay up, like, 20 cents if you add the minus 2,000 favorite. So just watch this one, folks. Like, there's no reason to get involved investment-wise in this fight, in my opinion. Unless you beat that line move and you got a better number in your pocket, you kind of missed the boat. Next up, we got Jared Mirshard taking on Christoph Jotko. GM3 came in at 185. Jotko came in at 186. Blank stare. Classic GM3 on the scales today. Just kind of does his thing and moves on. Christoph Jotko, no issues whatsoever. Easy way in for him. Another guy that's very professional, gets it done as always. When they face off, slight height advantage for Jotko, and he was barefoot. So he is even a little bit taller than we saw at the face-offs because Gerald Meerschaert was wearing flip-flops. GM3 is a bit thicker, though, which, you know, striker versus grappler, we do tend to see that. That kind of makes sense. Story checks out. This is a spot where I'm just kind of frozen here. I don't like laying wood on Jotko. He's low volume. He doesn't fight in a way that really is super pleasing to the judges, so he goes to split a lot. He fights close with his opponents a lot. He is relatively intelligent. He uses the wrestling well. He's got a high percentage takedown defense. And even though he's not like a volume guy, he hits you enough to get the job done. So it's just not a pretty style of fight. He probably should win this one. But at the same time, Gerald Meerschaert is just the guy that you keep blind betting as an underdog. Especially if you've cashed in on Gerald Meerschaert recently as an underdog. Don't stop. This is not the time to stop. Like, this is not the time for people like me to jump on, because I've been on the other side of Gerald Meerschaert. Eventually, that streak of cashing as an underdog and cashing as a submission finish is gonna come to an end. But it hasn't yet. And as long as you've been on that train, you just keep on loading right back up to it until it finally breaks down and stops cashing for you. I lean to Christoph Jotko as the favorite here, but at the same time, I've been on the wrong side of Gerald Meerschaert for like his last 4 fights in a row, so I don't have a good read on this man, and he just always seems to be able to pull the rabbit out of his hat. I think he's the better boxer than Christoph Jotko. I worry about Christoph Jotko kind of controlling the pace on the feet. If Gerald Meerschaert just wants to box with this man for 15 minutes, believe it or not, I could see him edging out a volume-based decision win. So, like, it's totally possible for Gerald Mirshard to win this weekend without getting a submission. We know he needs to get it to the ground, and that's not something Jocko really gets involved in. He did talk about being a blanket in his interview this week, so, like, I personally wouldn't be testing Gerald Mirshard's takedown defense and grappling ability based on what we've seen. Props to you if you're confident enough to go for that, Christoph. I'm going to say complete pass for me from a betting perspective. The weigh-ins kind of also favor me towards Jocko the same way I leaned earlier in the week. So I'll say Jocko probably gets the win, but again, zero surprise whatsoever if Gerald Mirshard just does his thing and locks up another submission at some point by jumping guard or climbing this guy like a tree. Darren Elkins taking on Tristan Connolly coming up next. We have got Darren Elkins as a minus 170 favorite, plus 150 on Tristan Connolly, and it's finally time, folks. I pulled that trigger. I loaded up on my dog, Tristan Connolly. I'm ready for this one. So Darren Elkins came in at 145.5. Connolly 146. Darren Elkins, he is not the best looker on the scales. He never has been. He's one of those guys that has just an awkward physique for a fighter. You're not going to be overly impressed anytime he weighs in. Tristan Connolly on the flip side of this thing, he came up rocking the sunglasses, and you all know I hate when fighters rock the sunglasses. I think they're hiding something, but he gets away with it because he took them off. He came up there, he wore the sunglasses, and then he popped them up afterward. It's like, oh, it's okay. It's all okay. We'll let you slide, Tristan. So this is a spot where I've been looking at this spot all week, waiting for this line to peak. I wanted to get the best number on this one. I see nothing but love for my guy, Darren Elkins. And honestly, I just think Darren Elkins is getting towards the end of his run. He's only got a couple fights left in him. I know he's talking about fighting until he's 40, but he turns 38 in like a week or two. Like, the guy is getting up there, and he's 60 years old based on his damage. He has taken so much punishment over the course of his MMA career. Now he's taking on Tristan Connolly, a guy that usually fights up at 155, is now dropping to 145, and has fought as high as 170 when he took his UFC short notice debut. What we've got is a spot where Tristan Connolly kind of knocked the rust off in his last fight, but he was fighting Pat Sabatini. Like, Pat Sabatini has shown that he's just a mauling offensive wrestler. He's a strong grappler, and even though Darren Elkins is a good wrestler, I don't think he's on the level of Pat Sabatini when it comes to his offensive wrestling. So I don't think Connolly is going to get held down by Darren Elkins the way that Pat Sabatini was able to do that to him. I think this fight is going to be much more contested than that. If you listen to the interviews, Tristan Connolly understands the assignment here. He talked about how people clip Darren Elkins, they think they've got him hurt, they go for the finish, they blow their wad, and then that's when he can turn the tables on them, come back, and get them out of there. He knows better than that. He's going to be patient. He understands he needs to engage in some of these grappling exchanges. If he's got him hurt, back off, wait for the moment to land another shot. I actually think that this kind of a cerebral approach from Tristan Connolly is exactly what we're looking for. He's not going to brawl with Darren Elkins. If he comes in with this kind of an intelligent approach, I just think this number's way too wide. I think these guys should be about a pick'em at this point. I think Tristan has all the tools necessary to win this fight, and he's got a decent size advantage over Darren Elkins. Not that that necessarily means anything, but if we're talking about a grappling-heavy offense here, this is a guy who out-grappled Michel Pereira, who is a monster at 170 pounds, a guy that walks around, over 200 and cuts to 170. He was able to do that for 15 minutes. I don't think he's going to have trouble out-grappling a smaller man for 15 minutes, especially now, again, like I said, now that he's got the rust knocked off, because I know Pat Sabatini was able to out-grapple him, but in that third round, Tristan was coming on strong. Tristan gave anybody with a Pat Sabatini ticket in their pocket a heart attack there in that third round. I think he can do that here. And honestly, with the way that Darren Elkins' damage is kind of adding up on him, the way that his durability is fading, and we're seeing it fight to fight to fight, I would almost think about sprinkling Tristan Connolly round 3. Like, I think it's going to be a decision, but I can see the referees starting to save Elkins from himself in these fights. If he gets wobbled, if he gets hurt, I can see the officials starting to kind of take mercy on him and stop these fights a whole lot sooner than we're used to seeing. Now, Tristan Connolly, not known for being like a punching power finisher guy, he's got some pop in his hands, though, so the deeper this fight goes, the more tired and sloppy they get. If he cuts off the cage well, lands a couple big shots, I could see Darren going down and the referee pulling him off. So maybe a round 3 sprinkle, we'll see. I like Tristan Connolly a lot, especially at this price tag, and I know I'm going against the majority of MMA Twitter, but so be it sometimes. I don't mind being on an island here on this one. I think it's kind of a changing of the guard spot and the beginning of the end for Darren Elkins. Next fight up, we got Jared Gordon taking on Grant Dawson. Now, both these guys came in at 155.5, And we've got Jared Gordon looking fantastic on the scales. This is a spot where, again, I'm not trying to be biased or anything like that here for you guys. I'm not only ever going to point out the upside to my fighter. I bet against Jared Gordon in this spot. He looks like he is filling back out up at 155 really well. Extremely well muscled, solid flex. He is in great shape today. Grant Dawson looked very well relaxed. He's in good shape as well. No surprise there. Now, when they face off, decent size advantage for Dawson. We knew that coming in. I got in early on this one. I got 3 units at minus 150 on Grant Dawson, and the money on Dawson has just kind of continued to flow in. On Superbook, he's a minus 180 favorite. I've seen him up at minus 200 in some other places, so I think he can actually end up being a little bit higher than that, but I think it's justified. So he's going to have a size and strength advantage here, and if you listen to the interviews with Grant Dawson, he talked about the move that he made to ATT recently. Something that he talked about was he's been with Glory MMA and James Krause ever since he was a kid. Like, he graduated high school and started training at Glory immediately. That's all he's ever known. So he talked about his last fight and how it's the first time he's ever like gassed out and had a hard time in the third round the way he did. Normally he's got a great pace, great cardio, never slows down late. So he's fully aware of the problem that he had last time, and part of the reason he made the move to ATT was because he felt like he just wasn't being pushed enough anymore. He was a big fish in a small pond. He had nobody that really could like force him to that next level at that gym anymore, so he had to look elsewhere. And he's making a point in this fight. Someone asked about how Jared Gordon gets knocked out and how the chin concerns is maybe something that he could exploit. And Grant Dawson said, no, I'm not looking for that. I'm going to make a point. I'm going to take him down until he gives up his neck or gets tired and quits. So this thing's going the distance. Grant Dawson by knockout was something I was going to look for. I thought especially going over to ATT, maybe they would add some wrinkles to his game and make him more dangerous with his hands. But he is on a mission here to show everybody that he's not going to gas out in round 3 again. So I think he's just going to maul Jared Gordon. And I think we're seeing this thing go over 2.5. I think it's going to be Dawson by decision because I do not expect Jared Gordon to give up some kind of a fluky sub. Obviously, it could happen. Dawson is very offensively potent, so he could lock up a sub in some way. It could happen, but I'm not going to be playing the sub prop on this one because we've seen Jared Gordon really only have trouble with his chin. His submission and his grappling defense are both on point, and I think Grant Dawson is just bigger, stronger, better wrestler, mauls him. That's how I see this fight playing out. Like I said, 3 units at minus 150. I'm already in, relatively well invested here for this one. I don't mind that 180 price tag if you want to play the Grant Dawson by decision. I said earlier, somebody tweeted me and they were like, hey, I played Grant Dawson by decision to bring the price down, and I was like, ugh, like he could knock him out, bro. Like don't get fancy on this one. I'm kind of feeling getting fancy on this one. After hearing him and the mission that he is on, I just think it's going to be a 15-minute slog, and I fully expect him to go the full 15. So Grant Dawson by decision, maybe not a bad way to play it if you don't want to lay the minus 180. Andre Fili taking on Joanderson Brito coming up next. Both guys came in at 145.5. Fili was in fantastic shape. He was feeling himself up there, just dripping confidence on the scale today. Now his opponent, Joanderson Brito, on the other hand, was absolutely jacked. I don't know how that man makes 145. Like, holy hell, he packs some muscle on. No issues for him. Flex was on point. Fili is much taller. However, we've got the short, stocky power advantage of Brito. And this is where I like Fili to win this fight, but I have a hard time laying minus 230, which is where he's currently priced at. Brito is plus 195. We've seen Fili give up takedowns, and the ground game has really been kind of a struggle for him. That's Brito's game. Brito crashes the pocket, lands these big bombs, and then tries to expose you on the ground. That's all he does. So if he can get Fili down, he absolutely can out-wrestle Fili, maybe submit him on the floor. The dog is live here in this spot, absolutely, but also at the end of the day, I can't get Fili's last performance out of my head. He is peak level confidence right now. He's coming in with a chip on his shoulder because of the way his last fight ended when he was just destroying his opponent. I'm not standing in front of the Fili train right now, folks. Like, I don't really want to parlay him or anything like that because I recognize Joanderson Brito is a very serious opponent, but at the same time, I have no interest in getting in front of the Fili train. I know a lot of people I respect are taking that plus 200 dog shot on Joanderson Brito, but for me, it would be favored or pass. Next up, co-main event, Jake Collier taking on Andrei Arlovsky. Collier tipping the scales at 265 this morning. Arlovsky came in at 246. Collier did his classic thing, blank stare, got off the scale as quickly as possible. Andrei Arlovsky sticking his tongue out, no issues, solid shape for the old man, looking good. Andrei is massive, folks. This is the spot that I kind of have been watching and waiting patiently for. Andrei Arlovski is a heavyweight. Jake Collier is a middleweight who is playing at heavyweight. And this is, when you see these two guys face off, like, I kind of in my brain had them being roughly the same height and thinking that, you know, the reach for Collier, I think he's got a 1-inch reach advantage, was going to be something that plays into this. The leg kicks was going to be something. The volume was going to be something. But it's like, man, the last time Andrei Arlovski had a size advantage like this, his one-hitter quitters were enough to nullify like a 5 or 6 strike deficit, because he's just a big man and his timing is excellent. So when you come in to hit him, he makes sure he gets you back before you exit that pocket area. So Andrei is a master of maintaining that range and that distance. I lean with the favorite here. I know a lot of people, again, are jumping on Jake Collier here in this spot because he's younger, because he's faster, because of that volume. We've seen this story before. We've seen Andrei Arlovski shut down the speed before. We've seen him control the range and manage a younger fighter before. Like, the guy is just the savviest of savvy veterans. And there was a little bit of concern of like, you know what, maybe the volume Collier puts on him will be enough to actually like break Andrei Arlovski at this point. Collier's not much of a finisher. And especially with that size discrepancy, his hands are not going to be enough to dent Andrei Arlovski's head. I think Andrei is going to have no problem shutting him down, and when they trade, it'll be one of those things where it's apparent who the bigger, stronger man is in this spot. So I'm looking Andrei Arlovski. I've been tempted to bet it all week, but I know it's probably going to go to a split decision, so it's one of those spots where I don't know that there's necessarily value on either side of this number at this point. It's probably about right. Goes the distance, maybe the play, or the over 2.5 at -205, maybe that's the move if you want to have something on the co-main event. But I think Andrei Arlovski just kind of grown mans him in this spot. Main event time, Rob Font taking on Marlon Vera. Let's get that tinfoil hat back, why don't we? Let's squeeze that right on there. It fits. It's a good fit. Rob Font came in at 238.5, 2.5 pounds over the limit. Marlon Vera made 136. And Rob Font looked rough, folks. He did not look good on the scales today. He lost his balance getting off the scale and legitimately like tripped and stumbled. He's a guy that they called no cutting any further than this, so he's not going to try and actually get down to 136 or anything like that. Marlon Vera had no issues whatsoever. He was up there, big smile, excited, relaxed, ready for his moment. And then when they face off, Rob Font did the thing where he like looked him up and down, almost like he was like, you know, scoping out the opposition, challenging him a little bit. And then he was like super erratic and like kept his head down and wouldn't meet the eyes of Marlon Vera. Now, Vera obviously is like crazy eyes burning a hole through the forehead of Rob Font, waiting for a moment to make eye contact with him. And Rob Font faltered and didn't meet his eyes. And this is the kind of thing where it's like, you got to wonder where the mental game is at here. And I think Marlon Vera is very clearly winning the mental side of this thing. He's enjoying a nice plate of pancakes over after his weigh-in, putting videos up of it, whereas Font is not able to get himself off the scale without tripping and then can't meet his opponent's eyes. Like, very, very awkward. And Font is not a guy that like backs down from his opponents or anything like that. So had me very much questioning what's going on here in this spot. Again, it's a 5-round main event. It's a spot I've talked about wanting to be on the Vera side essentially all week. I understand the angle of Rob Font being the favorite. I know the boxing advantage is going to be there. The volume advantage probably should be there, but we've seen him get hit with big shots. We've seen him have a weakness in the grappling. We've seen him slow down after taking some of that punishment. I think this is the perfect fight for Marlon Vera to really announce himself as a legitimate contender for this title. Not that he hasn't done that already, but taking out a guy like Rob Font is really going to cement the fact that he is gunning for that title. And I think it's kind of a changing of the guard spot. You know, Rob Font's opponents, his last few, you can poke some holes in that resume. You can talk about how these guys are kind of past their prime, and that's maybe why he's been able to beat them. He's not going to knock out a guy like Vera because Vera's just absolutely made of steel. And if you come in with that volume-based striking approach with a guy like Marlon Vera, you're going to get hit. We've seen what happens when Vera hits people. On top of that, I think Vera is just going to be able to bully Rob Font in the small cage. I think we end up on the ground at some point. I tossed 2 units on Marlon Vera at +110, line available at Superbook Sports, and I also put a half unit on Vera by submission at 9-1. I do think we see this fight hit the ground at some point, whether it's a club and sub and it's a scramble on the floor, or whether Marlon Vera just decides to go ahead and rip Font to the mat. I think this fight goes later, probably round 3, 4, or 5. I might sprinkle those round props if I'm having a good night by the time we get there. But I do think that Marlon Vera is going to win this fight, whether it's on the judges' scorecards with his wrestling, whether it's by tapping Rob Font, by just being the more physical man on the mat, or if he even just KOs him clean because Rob Font had a bad weight cut and he's just not all there this week. I could see Vera winning basically all the ways available. Again, I think this finish comes late, rounds 3, 4, or 5. Maybe it hits the judges' scorecards and Font is able to hang in there, especially if Vera goes for a grappling heavy approach. That could be something that takes place. I like Vera. Let's go, Cheeto. That's the Undefeated Post Weigh-In Show, folks. Good luck on all your degenerate action tomorrow at UFC Vegas 53. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram if you want to see my official plays and picks. I will tweet and post those. Of course, tomorrow I'll have the full betting recap of my entire card for UFC Vegas 53. Subscribe here to Pub Sports Radio and make sure you check out Superbook Sports. Let's roll, everybody. Have a good one.